But hey, let's get to our first guest, Senator Jim Talent. As I said, Senator Jim Talent. Senator Jim Talent. I used to work for him. Very smart man on defense issues. Knows those issues well, and he's going to give us his views on Moab. Okay, Senator. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you today, sir?
I am fine.
Good.
How are you?
I can't complain. As you can tell, I was a little nervous there at the beginning, messing up, but we'll make it through these past 3 hours. Senator,
it's charming. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. Let the audience, the audience I'm sure knows that, you were a former senator and a former congressman here in Missouri. Tell the audience some of the things that you've been doing afterwards that were defense related, with the Heritage Foundation and the other things that you're doing.
Well, I've been associated with several think tanks and focusing on military preparedness issues. So right now I'm with AEI, the American Enterprise Institute. I'm a visiting scholar with them. Chris, you've known me a long time. I never thought of myself as a scholar, but that's how they list me.
I do.
And I'm a senior fellow with the Bipartisan Policy Center. We just did a task force on military personnel policy. I also I'm on a number of commissions, the U.S.-China Commission. I've done the National Defense Panels. I did a commission on bioterrorism. I co-chaired that. So I've been focusing on trying to get a sound national security policy for the United States in the post-Cold War era. And, we've struggled with that for 20 years, and we're struggling with it today as a country.
Well, we appreciate your efforts. Let's talk about the Moab bomb. First, I'd like to know, were you aware of this weapon? I heard that it came in 2000, and you were in Congress at that time. Were you aware of this weapon?
I confess I was not. I mean, I'm not all that surprised at it. There's a class of weapons, bunker busters or whatever, big bombs that are used when you want to do what we did here, which is to try and take out caves and tunnels. And that's a common tactic of counterinsurgents to get underground because they're safe, or the safer there from, our other kinds of systems. But no, this one I was not aware of until they used it. It's technically the massive Ordnance air blast, or Moab, or mother of all bombs.
Tell me this: North Korea is celebrating the anniversary of their regime this coming Saturday, and they've been kind of intimating that they're going to have a nuclear blast test. But I've read that they're probably not going to have that test. They're probably going to have a massive military parade like most communist regimes do. Do you think that this Moab bomb that President Trump dropped, do you think that may have had an influence on North Korea?
Yeah, I mean, look, I like to say that, other countries pay attention to what our government is doing, even if we in America often don't, okay? So what they've seen is decisiveness from the United States in the last week or so. I think we've convinced the Chinese that now is not the time for a new North Korean test, because they've been warning the North Koreans more stringently than they ever have in the past, including threatening to cut off their oil, which is that's a big deal for them. So if they don't do the test, then I think we can chalk this up as an example of policy working. Now, we have to do this over the long term, and we have to do it on a lot of tracks, and I'm sure the Trump administration is considering many options in this.
Tell me this, Senator, we all know that North Korea is very unstable, very unpredictable. But one thing that I've never understood, and we are afraid of North Korea, putting a nuclear weapon on a missile and maybe firing it towards Japan or firing it towards the United States, which, that's feasible. But what I don't understand is, why would the North Korean dictator do that when he would know that the United States would retaliate so massively that he wouldn't have really a country to govern after something like that? I mean, would he do that?
Yeah, there's two concerns here. One of them is that, and he fosters this image of unpredictability, of even craziness, and deterrence with somebody who's not rational. Is a difficult thing. I mean, maybe he doesn't care. what happens. The other danger is regime instability there. And that's not a stable regime. So if it starts to go down, and he knows what that means, the regime goes down, he's going down. So at that point, he may not care. In other words, it's a scorched earth thing. So, the real answer to this, which we should have been doing consistently all along, is effective missile defense, so that we can shoot down the missile and we can have an effective defense against a rogue state like this. Against a major nuclear power, that can shoot hundreds of missiles at us, it's a different thing.
I know that China, doesn't want to be told by Western powers and other nations, how to conduct their business. But why don't they influence more, have more influence, or influence North Korea more to come into line with the family of nations and stop doing nuclear tests and being provocative?
Yeah. Well, here we are dealing with a rational actor in the Chinese, Chris, and they value North Korea as a buffer state. They define that's a very high priority for them. So they do not want regime instability, and they don't care about how terrible this guy is. And remember, they're not so great themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So they have been concerned about his recklessness. They don't like the unpredictability. He's actually taken out some of his family members who were closest to the Chinese, and they didn't like that. But the downside to them in the past of tolerating that was not as great as the risk to them of upsetting the regime and having instability. Because if the regime goes down, then the South Koreans are going to come in from the south, and we're going to come in with them, and that scares the Chinese. So what President Trump has done is increase to them the sense of downsides if they don't control them, right? Because President Trump, I suspect, I have no inside information, but I suspect what he told Xi Jinping was, look, this is your problem. I mean, this guy wouldn't exist if you didn't support it. And we expect you to deal with him and to deal effectively. And if you don't, things are going to happen that you don't like. And who knows what details he went into. But I think that's caused a little more energy in the part of the Chinese.
One of the things I've always heard and read that, one of the reasons why China doesn't want a lot of instability with North Korea is because they don't want millions or hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing into their country. One thing I've known to understand, these are both communist nations, and communist nations you think of have really tight borders. Is that a possibility that if there was things going on in North Korea, would they be able to flee into China?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I doubt they'd be able to seal off the border entirely, and the reputational consequences of them of doing that are pretty great. I mean, they have a legitimate problem, but again, it's their problem. I mean, this regime would not exist if they weren't supporting it, and if 60 years ago they hadn't propped them up in a war, which I imagine that the president reminded them of. In other words, we had taken care of this in the 50s, if not for the Chinese. So, they own him, and if anybody does, and they need to deal with him. And I imagine that's the message that the Trump administration is sending to them. To be fair, I mean, President Obama tried to do the same thing, but I would imagine President Trump put an exclamation point at the end of that sentence.
Right. Senator, I know you write a lot of articles for National Review and other things. Do you have a latest article that you've written that you'd like to promote today?
Yeah, the latest thing I did on National Review, and you just go National Review, Jim Talent Archive, and you'll get it. But it's on China, as a matter of fact, and the military buildup the Chinese have engaged in the last 20 years, and how that shifted the balance of power in the region, and what that means for American interests. So, Chris, sometimes I'm Johnny One Note. I mean, we need to be strong, and strength is a lot of things, economic, diplomatic, but the foundation of it is military strength. Not to fight. Okay, but to be strong enough so that you don't have to fight in a lot of instances. And I think the administration gets that on a conceptual level. They just have to follow through.
And one final question. It's a personal political question for you, Senator. Will we ever see Jim Talent's name on a ballot in Missouri again?
No, I don't anticipate doing that, Chris. I mean, there's a timing to politics, and I ran 3 times statewide. I never say never, but I don't anticipate it. What I would like, and I made no secret of this, I'd like to be in a position to help with the buildup of our forces so that we can be strong and we can be safe in a lot of places around the world and all over the world. I hope. That I'd like to do if I ever have a chance to do it. So I did some interviewing with the administration. We'll see what happens as time goes on.
Well, Senator, we want to thank you for taking your time out on this Good Friday, and happy Good Friday, and happy Easter to you and your family. And sure appreciate you coming on. And as you know, you're always welcome here on the Mark Cox Show.
Well, Chris, same to you, and have a good rest of the program.
Thank you, Senator, and please give your family my regards.
Will do. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.